I want to show you something on your dinner plate tonight. Something you put there deliberately. Something you chose because you were told it was healthy. Something you may have been eating for years, maybe decades, believing it was helping you. And I want to explain why. For your blood sugar, it may be doing the opposite. Now, before you turn this off, I want to be very clear about something from the start. I am not here to tell you that vegetables are bad. They are not. Vegetables are among the most important foods a human being can eat, and I would never tell you otherwise. But there is a category of vegetable that almost nobody warns people about when they are managing blood sugar or insulin resistance. A category that gets classified as healthy because it is a vegetable, because it grows from the ground, because it has vitamins, because it looks nothing like a candy bar, and yet produces a blood sugar response that can rival a bowl of white rice. These are the starchy vegetables. And today I want to walk you through 3 of the most commonly eaten ones, what they do to blood sugar, why the health messaging around them is incomplete, and importantly, what you can eat instead, or alongside them, to significantly reduce their impact. Because the goal is never elimination for its own sake. The goal is understanding. And once you understand what these 3 vegetables actually do inside your body, you will make very different choices about how and when you eat them. Let's start with what makes a vegetable starchy. All vegetables contain carbohydrates, but most of the vegetables we associate with healthy eating, broccoli, spinach, zucchini, cucumbers, peppers, leafy greens, contain very small amounts of carbohydrate and very high amounts of fiber and water. The carbohydrates they contain are mostly structural, releasing glucose slowly and gently into the bloodstream. Starchy vegetables are different. They contain high concentrations of starch, which, as you now know from our earlier videos, is a carbohydrate that breaks down into glucose rapidly during digestion. They are denser, heavier, and more calorie-rich than their non-starchy counterparts, and they produce a blood sugar response that is measurably different from a salad of leafy greens. The problem is not that these vegetables exist. The problem is that most people managing blood sugar have never been given this distinction. They have been told to eat their vegetables full stop without understanding that not all vegetables behave the same way in the body. Let me take you through the 3 most important ones. The first vegetable is the potato. I know, the potato feels fundamental. It is on almost every table in America. It has been a staple food for generations, and in many ways it is genuinely nutritious. A medium potato provides potassium, vitamin C, vitamin B6, and a meaningful amount of fiber, particularly in the skin. But here is what a potato does to your blood sugar. A medium baked potato, skin on, plain, nothing added, has a glycemic index of approximately 85. To put that in context, white bread sits at around 75. The baked potato raises blood sugar faster than white bread, but it does not stop there. Mashed potatoes, which involve removing the skin and processing the potato further, have a glycemic index of approximately 87. French fries, where the potato is cut into strips and fried at high temperature, have a glycemic index of around 75, similar to white bread, but consumed in quantities that significantly magnify the total glucose load. The cooking method matters. The preparation matters. But the underlying reality is consistent. The potato, in its most common forms, is among the highest glycemic foods that exists, not just among vegetables, but across all foods. Why? Because the potato is almost pure starch, with relatively little fiber relative to that starch content. A medium potato contains roughly 37 grams of total carbohydrates and only about 4 grams of fiber. Most of that carbohydrate is digestible starch that your gut enzymes break down rapidly. And the starch in a potato is a particular type, waxy starch in some varieties, starchy and floury in others, that is highly susceptible to enzymatic breakdown. When a potato is cooked, the heat causes the starch granules to swell and burst. They become even more accessible to digestive enzymes, even more rapidly converted to glucose. For someone whose fasting glucose is already elevated, whose insulin resistance means that glucose spikes are harder to recover from, a baked potato at dinner can significantly elevate blood sugar through the night and contribute directly to a high morning reading. Now here is the nuance I promised. Not all potatoes behave the same way, and the same potato prepared differently can have dramatically different effects. We discussed this briefly in the second meal effect video, but it deserves repetition here. When you cook a potato and then let it cool, refrigerate it overnight and eat it cold or at room temperature the next day, the starch undergoes a structural change called retrogradation. It transforms into resistant starch, a form that resists digestion and passes to the large intestine largely intact, where gut bacteria ferment it and produce the short-chain fatty acids we have discussed before. The glycemic index of a cold-cooked potato drops to approximately 25 to 35, compared to 85 for the same potato eaten hot and freshly cooked. That is not a small difference. That is a transformation. A warm potato eaten freshly cooked is a high glycemic food. The same potato cooled overnight and eaten in a salad the next day is a low glycemic food. This single preparation insight, if applied consistently, can change the metabolic impact of potatoes in your diet without eliminating them. Additionally, eating potato with significant protein and fat, not plain but with olive oil, with eggs, alongside a large portion of non-starchy vegetables, significantly blunts the glucose response. The company the potato keeps on the plate matters enormously. The second vegetable is corn. Corn is perhaps the most misunderstood food on this list because it occupies a strange position in the cultural imagination. It is a vegetable when it is fresh. It is a grain when it is dried. And it is one of the most processed ingredients in the modern food supply. High fructose corn syrup, cornstarch, corn flour, corn-based breakfast cereals, making its natural form seem wholesome and simple by comparison. And fresh corn on the cob, summery, golden, sweet, feels like the most innocent thing in the world. Here is the biology. A medium ear of fresh corn contains approximately 25 grams of carbohydrates and only about 2.5 grams of fiber. That carbohydrate to fiber ratio is poor for blood sugar management. The glycemic index of corn is approximately 52 to 60, which places it in the moderate range. But the portion size problem with corn is significant, because corn is eaten in forms that make large quantities very easy to consume without realizing it. A single serving of corn kernels is relatively modest in impact. But a large ear of corn, a generous bowl of corn in a salad, a burrito filled with corn and rice and beans, a corn chowder, the cumulative carbohydrate load escalates quickly. And here is something that makes corn particularly relevant for blood sugar management: its sugar content. Sweet corn, the variety most commonly eaten fresh, has been selectively bred over decades to contain higher and higher levels of simple sugars, specifically sucrose and glucose. The modern sweet corn sold at grocery stores and farmers markets is significantly sweeter than the corn varieties grown 50 years ago. That sweetness is real sugar that enters your bloodstream after digestion. This does not mean corn is poisonous. It means corn deserves portion awareness and context in a way that most people never apply to it. How do you manage corn without eliminating it? First, portion. A small amount of corn in a mixed dish, a quarter cup as part of a salad or stir fry, has a very different metabolic impact than a large ear eaten alone as a side dish. Second, pairing. Eating corn alongside a large portion of non-starchy vegetables, a quality protein source, and a healthy fat reduces the glycemic response significantly. The same principles apply here as everywhere else in this series. Third, form. Whole corn kernels on the cob digest more slowly than corn that has been processed. Creamed corn, corn flour tortillas, cornbread, where the structural integrity of the kernel has been broken. Whole corn eaten in reasonable portions alongside protein and fat is manageable. Processed corn products tend to behave much more like refined carbohydrates. The third vegetable is the parsnip. Now this one I include because it surprises people more than any other item on this list. Potatoes are large and starchy, most people can accept that. Corn is sweet, people can accept that too, but parsnips look and feel like a root vegetable in the way that carrots do. They are white, they are firm, they are used in soups and roasts. They seem almost medicinal in their earthiness. But a cooked parsnip has a glycemic index of approximately 52, which is moderate on its own. The issue with parsnips is not that they are extreme in isolation, it is that they are almost always eaten in combination with other high glycemic foods at the same meal. Roasted alongside potatoes, mixed into a root vegetable medley with carrots and sweet potato, pureed into a soup with cream and no counterbalancing fiber. The cumulative glycemic load of a meal that includes parsnips, potatoes, and bread is significantly higher than any one of those foods in isolation. But I raise parsnips for another reason that is more important than their glycemic index. I raise them because they represent a category of food that is widely considered healthy, root vegetables, earthy and traditional and natural, without anyone explaining that this entire category carries a higher starch content and a higher glycemic impact than leafy and cruciferous vegetables. The root vegetable category, which includes potatoes, parsnips, beets, and to a lesser extent carrots, is a category that deserves specific attention from anyone managing blood sugar. Not because these foods are harmful, but because they are categorically different from above-ground vegetables in their carbohydrate content and glycemic impact, and most people managing blood sugar have never been told this. Let me pause here and make something very clear. I am not telling you to never eat potatoes, corn, or root vegetables. I am telling you that these foods require the same conscious attention you would give to bread or rice because biologically, in terms of their blood sugar impact, they behave similarly. Eating a large baked potato and thinking you had a vegetable-heavy dinner is a misperception that can explain, for many people, why their post-dinner glucose numbers and their morning fasting readings are higher than they expect. Understanding this changes how you build a plate, not what you are allowed to eat. Now let me tell you about Harold. You may remember Harold from the Fasting Numbers Protocol video. 74 years old, former football coach, disciplined, meticulous man who had been doing everything right for years without getting the results he expected. After we addressed his evening protocol and his morning numbers improved significantly, Harold came back 3 months later with a different puzzle. His fasting glucose was now much better. His morning readings had stabilized. But his post-dinner glucose readings, the number he checked 2 hours after eating, were still elevated more often than he liked, particularly on certain evenings. He was precise, as engineers and coaches tend to be, and he had noticed a pattern. The evenings when his 2-hour post-dinner reading was high were almost always evenings when he had what he described as a full vegetable dinner. Roasted vegetables, no bread, no rice, lean protein. He felt like he had done everything right. When I asked him to describe exactly what was on the plate on those evenings, the pattern was immediately clear. Roasted potatoes, roasted parsnips and carrots, a corn salad he made with canned sweet corn, and a piece of baked salmon. Every single item he considered a vegetable was a starchy vegetable or a root vegetable with moderate to high glycemic impact. The salmon was excellent, but the rest of the plate was, in metabolic terms, structurally similar to a bowl of mixed carbohydrates with some fiber. He had done everything his previous understanding told him was correct. He had avoided bread, avoided rice, avoided obvious starchy foods, and yet the plate he built had a glycemic load equivalent to a medium carbohydrate meal. We rebuilt his plate with a simple substitution framework. The roasted potatoes replaced on most evenings with roasted cauliflower, which has less than a third of the carbohydrate content and a minimal glycemic impact. When he wanted potatoes, we moved them to a cooled preparation, a cold potato salad made the day before, or reduced them to a small garnish portion rather than a featured item. The parsnips replaced with roasted zucchini, green beans, and asparagus, which are all non-starchy and produce essentially no meaningful glucose rise. The corn salad reduced in portions significantly and mixed with cucumber, tomatoes, olive oil, and feta cheese, so the corn became one element of a larger salad rather than the base of it. The salmon remained unchanged. 2 weeks later, Harold's 2-hour post-dinner readings had dropped by an average of 28 points on the evenings he applied this framework. He was genuinely surprised. He had not changed how much he ate. He had not changed his protein. He had only changed which vegetables he chose. He looked at his log and said something that I have heard in different forms from many patients who reach this point in their understanding. I thought a vegetable was a vegetable. I didn't know they work so differently. That is the insight this video is built on. A vegetable is not a vegetable in the way that a calorie is not a calorie. The category tells you almost nothing about the metabolic effect. The specific food, its starch content, its fiber content, how it was prepared, what it was eaten with, and how much was consumed, these are the variables that determine what happens in your body. Let me now give you a clear, practical framework for navigating this every day without turning dinner into a homework assignment. There are 2 categories of vegetables, and the distinction is simple. Non-starchy vegetables are the foundation of every plate for someone managing blood sugar. These are the above-ground leafy, cruciferous, and water-rich vegetables: spinach, kale, arugula, romaine, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, zucchini, cucumber, celery, bell peppers, tomatoes, green beans, asparagus, mushrooms, eggplant, cabbage. These vegetables have a minimal effect on blood sugar. They are high in fiber and water. You can eat them in large quantities without meaningful glucose consequences. They should fill at least half your plate at every meal. Starchy vegetables are the carbohydrate portion of your plate. They include potatoes, sweet potatoes, corn, parsnips, beets, peas, squash varieties like butternut and acorn, and plantains. These are nutritious foods with genuine health benefits: vitamins, minerals, fiber, but they carry a meaningful carbohydrate load and should be treated as the carbohydrate quarter of your plate, not as free vegetables. A small to moderate portion, alongside abundant non-starchy vegetables and quality protein, is a very different metabolic event than a plate where starchy vegetables dominate. The practical rule: fill half your plate with non-starchy vegetables first. then add your protein. Then, if you want a starchy vegetable, it occupies the carbohydrate quarter of the plate, the same position that rice or bread would occupy. This mental reframe from vegetables as a uniform category to non-starchy vegetables as the foundation and starchy vegetables as the carbohydrate portion changes everything about how you build a plate. And it does not require giving up potatoes, corn, or parsnips. It requires understanding where they belong on the plate and how they behave in the body. The practical substitutions to keep available in your kitchen: for mashed or roasted potatoes, cauliflower mash or roasted cauliflower florets. The texture and satisfaction are remarkable, and the glycemic impact is minimal. For corn as a side or salad ingredient, reduce portion, combine with high-fiber vegetables, and include a protein and fat alongside. For root vegetable medleys, replace half or more of the root vegetables with zucchini, green beans, or broccoli. Roast them together, the flavors work beautifully. For soups and stews, use non-starchy vegetables as the bulk. Add legumes for filling substance, and include root vegetables in small amounts for flavor rather than volume. Before I close, the reminder that belongs in every video. If you are managing diabetes or any metabolic condition with medication, dietary changes, including changes to which vegetables you eat, can affect your blood sugar management and therefore your medication requirements. Please discuss any significant dietary shift with your doctor. Let them monitor your readings as you make changes. If you know someone who is eating carefully, choosing vegetables over processed foods, and still cannot understand why their numbers are not where they want them, someone who may be unknowingly building a plate full of starchy vegetables without realizing the impact, please share this video with them. The distinction between non-starchy and starchy vegetables is one of the most practical and immediately applicable pieces of information in blood sugar management, and most people never receive it. Next week, we are going to talk about sleep. The connection between poor sleep and insulin resistance is the last major piece of this series, and it is one of the most powerful. Why one bad night raises your blood sugar measurably the next morning. Why sleep deprivation and insulin resistance form a cycle that gets harder to break. And what you can begin doing tonight, even if sleep has been a problem for years. It connects directly to everything we have covered. Make sure you do not miss it. Subscribe, hit the bell. I will see you next week. I am Dr. Sterling. Take care of yourself. And tonight at dinner, fill half that plate with the green ones first.